Welcome to, or you can stay comfortable where you're seated, that's fine.
Which is what they're going to do.
Yeah.
They're going to stay right where they are.
I know.
Because they're afraid.
They're not children.
They don't want to come up.
All right, our timer's going, so I'm going to start and people can come in as they want and as they can. I'm Poppy Harlow, I'm with CNN. I'm a business correspondent and the anchor of CNN Money. And we have Scott and Scott. I'm going to call them Scott Left Coast, Right Coast.
Okay.
I always hate it when people read my bio as my introduction, so I don't want to do that. I told them that I just give them a minute each to say what they do. They go back to the early 90s, right? Knowing each other?
Yeah, we do,
A ways
actually.
back.
Yeah.
And I should note that Bob Long, unfortunately, is not well. He's sick. He could not make it, and we were excited to have him on for that very long-term newsroom experience, but he can't be with us today. So why
we'll
don't you
have
go
to
ahead?
cover.
You'll cover.
I'm a production company out of Los Angeles, been doing unscripted television now for years, and provide lots of content programs for both broadcast networks, cable networks, and now web content as well.
I'm a producer as well out of New York City. Scott and I have been producing television for quite some time. My background began in law enforcement for a number of years here in South Florida. And then I moved on to the other side of the crime scene tape, so to speak, and became a news reporter in West Palm Beach for a number of years, and then eventually up to WNBC, the flagship station for NBC in New York. Spent 10 years on the air as an investigative reporter there, and then moved to CBS local flagship station as a chief investigative reporter. And in 2007, Scott and I launched a national investigative news magazine show for investigative discovery called On the Case with Paul Azan.
It's in its, what, fifth season?
In the fifth season right now.
Very successful and a great show if you haven't seen it. We were talking in the room before we started about wanting to begin by talking about why the two of you, and I think many people out there, believe that local news in many ways is broken, but almost more importantly, why it hasn't changed in so many decades in a material way.
Well, I think, and that's where the good launching point is that in markets across the country, we find that our local newscasts are the same. There's the anchor desk and there's the newsroom, and pretty much all interchangeable reporters and anchors, unless you have someone that's been there for years and years. And our thought was, in looking at this, was to do something else. And how do we go ahead and reach out and find a new way of presenting local news in a local market where we can attract the 18 to 34s, the 25 to 54s, where we find that most of these local newscasts, I think, are 50, 55, even 60 plus. And we find younger eyeballs, as even all of us do, find breaking news really online, and when you see breaking news on a local newscast, it really isn't breaking news. So we are in the midst of launching a newscast, a news service in Los Angeles called Ping LA, which will be launching in the spring, which will do exactly that. We will have a newsroom, and we will have a young group of excited, passionate news reporters who will go out and get stories and bring it to our newsroom and present it in a way that we hope that will attract younger people to come who love news, want to hear the news, but they don't want to tune in at 5, 6, or 11.
So solely online, or are you looking for a broadcast partner?
We'll be an online launch in the spring, and then we will be reaching out to a broadcast partner sometime in the fall in Los Angeles that will take our content, and we will produce together with them an actual newscast, but it'll be the newscast of what we bring to them and to their station.
You know, it's interesting, we were talking before, Scott, about...
Which Scott?
I know, it's really hard.
Okay.
Left, I guess, right coast.
I got it.
New York, Scott, can I call you that, New York, Scott? You know, you spent so many years working in local news, and I'm wondering what you think works and what you think doesn't in terms of long form and the ability to do long form on the web, because that's something I'm certainly very passionate about, that I do as much as I can of at CNN, but it takes a lot more time, and it takes a much higher production quality, and it takes more money, frankly. So what do you think the future of long form can be, and breaking news, a 60 minutes type program on the web?
I think long form will always be challenging, whether it's on local news or on the web, because it's a cost basis. You know, how long can you give somebody to work on a specific story? how much research, how much dedication can you give that person with crew-wise to spend to work these stories. I think the issue really comes down to production value. I think viewers, we all know that viewers watch less local news and more other kind of programming, crime programming, CSI, Law and Order. They're seeing these types of shows that have a high production value, and they're becoming very used to that sort of flashy type of production. They're coming out of the 10 o'clock hour or the 9 o'clock hour if you're on in like a Fox or a CW station, and they're coming into a newscast which is ultimately flat. And viewers are really, I think, are rejecting the ability to tune into a newscast like that and not be entertained, but not be just entertained and not just be informed. They need to be both entertained and informed. And I think the way to do that really is to, when I was at NBC for many, many years, we all had a motto of, Edward R. Murrow, we have to impress that aspect of, continuing to keep the newscast pure and the journalism pure. And I'm not suggesting either of those change, but I'm saying that you can do those two aspects of it and still be able to add a little bit of music, a little bit of drama, and bring the newscast.
Well, especially with the technology that we have today.
Right.
Especially with that, so there should be no excuse on that front. We talked before about the holy grail for the young viewer. What is the holy grail of what the young viewer wants? And are they going to want to consume it online? Because I look at something like Patch, right, which AOL has invested a lot of money in, and which Tim Armstrong has come under a lot of pressure from some shareholders over, is whether or not Patch and this big investment in hyper-local news is the right way to go. They don't break out Patch results separately, but a lot are questioning whether this is going to prove to be strong in terms of a profitability aspect.
Well, I think the younger eyeballs have to be attracted to what they are attracted to. What do they go to? They go to cool shows. They go to reality series that may be on the edge, and there are plenty of them, and they're doing well. They're going to places, blogs that are, like Reddit or TechCrunch or some of these Mashable. These are the places that they're getting information.
And they go to they go to The Daily Show. No one's going to argue
They
that's
go to Daily
not a
Show, they go
smart
to
show.
Colbert, and this is, it's always been as an unscripted producer, really not in the news world. But when you see in primetime, daytime, whatever it is, the unscripted and scripted programs are always changing, trying new things. Different time periods are getting different things that are going to be tried out. Some win, some don't. But the news, the local news, has never tried anything else to me. It's always the same. It's the newscast, it's the newsroom, it's the same thing. It's time for something new, different anchor. The anchors change in Los Angeles. These the general assignment reporters, they look like they change almost weekly. So there's nobody to follow anymore. So this is the opportunity that we think we can get. And also the fact is, you're getting your breaking information on your mobile phone, you're getting it online through the mobile phone, or you're going to be on your laptop, or there's the tablets. There's so many places to get it now.
Your friends sending you a tweet to say that, the Giants won the game, or you're getting that in so many different ways that you don't have to actually tune in to there. The other thing really is, obviously, news directors across the country have an issue with budgets. How can we afford? Yeah, I'd like it a little bit flashier, and I'd like to add music or something, but how can we afford it? And what I say often is, I'll turn on a local newscast and I'll see a reporter sitting in front of a courthouse live at 11 o'clock at night.
Hours after the decision.
Hours.
And with a truck and a microwave and a union crew. Why are you spending the money that way?
So I'll give it, and also we're going to open it up for questions. So if anyone has a question, even during this, please raise your hand and I'll call you up. Otherwise, we'll leave the last few minutes. But I think a prime example, we were all in New York covering Hurricane Irene, right? And I was on call that weekend. But we didn't have a truck available for the location I had to be, and they were all over with Anderson here and Soledad here, and I was down in Battery Park. We had a TVU pack. I mean, if you don't know what it is, we call it the magic backpack. It's a live truck in a backpack. And it worked great, and it was just me and a very young producer out in the field doing live shots, and it was sort of, how are we going to do this when we don't necessarily have the resources available? There's other options, right?
But that's one great example of when to go live. When I'm watching local news and I see that weather is affecting my area, has my street been plowed?
Yep.
Have they been over to cover my area? That's when I think viewers depend on local news, especially breaking news with weather and things like that. But if it's a court decision that happened hours ago, you really don't, take that extra money, don't edit in the truck, take that extra money, edit back in-house. We have a little bit more sophisticated systems, a little bit more time, don't miss slot, and make it a better newscast. And at least, make the newscast flow together as one unit opposed to a couple of different segments that you're plugging in.
We've also seen a move away, I think, especially on cable news, from packaging. Unless you're going to have one show that's very dedicated to it, you're seeing more and more. We don't want that as a package. We want live with elements. Well, why do you want live with elements? It's going to be harder to tell. You're going to miss some of the facts. Well, that's how we want it. Do you two think that matters? Does it matter not to have the live bug up for 2 or 3 minutes when a package is running? Does that matter?
I think a live bug, I think it's a graphics important if you want to keep the viewer tuned to your station opposed to go somewhere else. I mean, CNN, all those major cable networks love breaking news, love that banner, because there's competition and they want to make sure that they can keep viewers tuned in to their station. If the news they're delivering is current, listen, I mean, when Joe Paterno passed away and you went to some of the ESPNs, the live breaking news banner stayed up for a short time, and then it really wasn't breaking news anymore. Then it was more reaction. I think that's a better way to handle it, opposed to just doing it. I mean, listen, if the election results are in and it's unfolding, absolutely you want to keep the viewers tuned into the air. But most importantly, you want to give them the information that's relevant when it's relevant, and if it's not, it's okay to say it happened 8 hours ago.
And what's going to be different about your program? What's going to be different? What?
Ping LA.
What's going to be different about it?
We're going to have basically a newsroom in a garage. And I think that is going to be a very cool and interesting set. We're going to have people that are going to be in cubicles sitting around, almost more of a TMZ type of style.
Are you going to bring people into your news meetings?
Oh, absolutely.
That's been done before, but are you going to do it in a way that people feel more involved in the decision-making process? The stream on Al Jazeera does it in an interesting way.
We're going to bring people in a reality-based way, but we're also going to give them what's going on in the news. And I think breaking news is one thing, but I think we're going to be always breaking news. And that's a little bit, it's a step up of where we're always going to give you something depending on the severity of the story, which can be very light or it can be pretty strong.
What about this idea of two-screen viewing and processing of information? Do you buy into that in terms of people watching it unfold on television and also having an online component to that? Are you really directing solely for online?
I think on our Paul Azan show, we do that. On Sunday nights when the show's on from 10 to 11, we put our producers on live online to talk and have a conversation with viewers about what's happening on screen. So we find it really, really works. I mean, at first, I was totally against it because my first thought was I don't want to redirect them from the television screen to their computer. But people have become so used to watching and typing and getting engaged in the show that it's worked very well.
And when you say it's worked very well, what's your success measure for that? Are you seeing it in the metrics, in the viewership? Are you seeing it in loyalty?
I think in loyalty.
I think we're seeing it both because to see people coming online, we've watched our numbers rise. The most important number is the women 25 to 54 for us and for the network as well. And I think we'll probably do the same thing with our service, being able to do things that people really haven't done before. And I want to go back into the technology a little bit. We'll be shooting our stories with iPad 2s with 4GS phones.
Shooting them on iPad 2s?
Yes.
Editing them right on the iPad?
Possibly, yes. Because there's these commercials now, and I can't remember, but it must be 2 or 3 different ones, but everyone's trying to, uptick the other person by saying, oh, wait a minute, there's news, I already got it 17 seconds ago. Or the guy who missed the taco party, wait a minute, we texted you 12 seconds ago. Everyone is trying to get it faster and faster and faster.
Do we have any questions, by the way, yet? Yep, right here.
Yeah, what about mobile apps?
Yeah, mobile apps is really important for sure. We'll have an app so they can just touch it and you'll be able to see our newsroom on the app.
I think to expand on that, because I did want to ask on your mobile strategy, what do you think that the mobile strategy should be for content creators, news content creators that want more eyeballs and that want the first eyeballs? How important is mobile? Because I have a BlackBerry. I cannot watch. I mean, I can watch my videos, CNN Money videos, but it's hard. It's easier on an iPhone, but it's still not as easy as it is on the traditional computers.
I don't know if the actual video is as important as getting the information. is learning what the news is.
So the print's a component of it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you see the commercials, and we've all looked at our iPhones and our PDAs and watched things happen. But I think if I'm wanting to interact with my viewer, I want them to know that we've got this information, and we have it here. This is what it is, and if you're interested, you can go to the next step. Next further step is go online, or even when we have our broadcast component in the fall, you can then tune to that local broadcast component. But it's really interacting with the viewer. The PDA interacts with viewers and online people.
I want to get to your question, yes?
I was just interested about the idea of the set, because to me, when you're talking about the younger viewer, that's
Yeah.
very, very wholly reminiscent about the problem of local news now, which is local.
Just being
news
trapped
do not
behind-
want to go and sit there for a half hour
Right.
examining a set. So, where the content is really what's
Right.
driven, and an individual, flippable, quickly surveyable content that relates to them in a different way. So you had mentioned some production techniques that you think might be more relatable to that demographic.
Well,
What do you think they are?
yeah, I mean, our cameras, where you have in most newsrooms, I guess, you have robotic cameras and you have your anchor desk and people are sort of locked to their position. Our cameras are going to go to our people. So if something's happening at desk number 3 and a story comes up, camera guy's going to walk right down to desk number 3. She'll turn the camera and give us the headline.
Here's the question, though. It's news. So how do you vet, if you're moving that quickly, how do you vet what you're going to report quickly
Well-
enough before the camera comes over? I mean, it's a challenge, right? You want it to feel fluid, and you want it to feel in the moment, but you
Right.
also have to be journalistically accurate.
Well, there's a central area where the stories are coming into, and you're deciding who has tape loaded, who's ready to go.
Yep.
So it's not as simple as just, somebody waving their hand saying,
Right.
you have to vet it, of course.
Yeah,
you
we have to
add
be sourced and
editorial.
all of the other
It's
stuff that
going
go
to be
there.
different. It's going to be different than TMZ. For
Yeah, but I think it's a great question, and I think part of it is if you ever watch something like Tosh 2.0,
Yeah.
where the viewers are so engaged with what's going on behind them and referring to it. I'm not saying it's exactly like that, but that model, I think, kind of works.
And that's not an expensive model. I mean, it's
No.
a green screen.
It's a
right?
green screen and
That's
Tosh.
green
Yep,
screen.
that's it.
I mean, really, do you really need, listen, local news has had its foothold for many, many, many years, and people will always, hopefully, watch local news. We're not saying they shouldn't be. What I'm saying is that there is a set of eyeballs that turn away from it, that watch The Daily Show to get their news, that watch other things to get their news. And what we're saying is the 50 plus and 60 plus, they'll always, rely on the anchors that they trust and the weather people that they trust and the sports people they trust. They should continue to do that. But the set of people that do not, the 25 to 54, who do not watch that, who are looking and going online, what we're saying is there is another opportunity there.
I think we're
And
also
that's-
going to be, finding our own stars. Young people who are passionate about the news, who want to be on camera. They want to report. They want
Yeah.
to do things that haven't been done before. We're looking at journalism schools across the country to invite them to come to us, be part of a new thing. They'll get their chops that way. They don't have to be trained the exact same way as you've learned in journalism school.
What's so interesting, I never went to journalism school. I worked at CBS Market Watch through college. I went to school in New York and then just, made my tape that way and was on the ground. And I had a young girl call me yesterday, said, I really want to be a reporter. How do I do it? I get the question all the time. And I said, be in a newsroom, be on the ground. Don't just be sitting necessarily behind a desk. That was my experience. But they also, I think people are starting to get this new outlet. They don't have to go the traditional route. I worked as an intern, then I worked at New York One, then Forbes.com, and then CNNMoney.com to CNN. I never went the traditional local news route, and online gives them that ability to do it in a different way that they haven't before, and then maybe they don't learn and get stuck in the old ways, which are not all bad, but that in many newsrooms haven't changed. And if you send a young, ambitious journalist through the same route that their, say, parents went through in the same career, they're not experiencing something new.
And that's a good point, because the delivery system from the talent seems to be a lot the same. It's this sing-songy, reading prompter badly, trying to get attention, flipping, switching, throwing, back to you, John, see you, Shirley. We want We want a different way of people just being themselves and talking about the story exactly about who they are. And I think we can
Yeah.
launch some really good careers that way.
As my executive producer, whose his biggest strength is he's such a visionary, right? I can get it done, but he has these great visions, and he always says, "Poppy, tell me a story and take me through the story." So some of our best shoots, we were on a Shell oil rig in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico for the anniversary, for a piece we put out on the anniversary of the Deepwater Horizon crisis. And it was literally shot from the helicopter to jumping off, take me on this story. Who's ever been on a rig offshore? And that, at least online, and it aired on television as well, but the longer version online translated so well in terms of the feedback we got, because you really took people on a journey. And I almost think that, and I'd be interested to know if you guys agree, that whether it's your computer screen or your mobile device, your iPad, there's almost this, more of a visceral connection with it than
Absolutely.
watching it on your television screen, so you can tell a story in a bit different way.
Well, I think it's content, really. It depends on how you choose to receive that content. And I think most, at least the younger eyeballs, as well as everyone else, that computer gets booted up, the iPad gets turned on, the iPhone gets put on. I think going to the television screen is probably last.
But the one interesting thing that you mentioned, Poppy, is that in that scenario, if I've got the television on, I can't change the story. I can't speed it up unless I DVR'd it. I can't switch it unless I'm going to switch stations. But if I'm on the iPad or the mobile phone and I don't like that selection, I can choose another selection. I can choose another story. And if I'm not liking that story, I can move on.
Should we, and any more questions, by the way? Yep, right here and then one in the back.
So I teach journalism, and I have access to the young eyeballs, and I also feel an obligation as a professor. I absolutely agree with you, you don't have to go through the J school route, so that actually makes us wonder what our relevance are as J schools. So we're trying to keep up with what the industry wants, that's why I'm here. What
Right.
is the frontier of local news? My
Right.
question is, what skills do graduates of
Yeah.
broadcasting or journalism programs need to compete in this new
And
environment?
to build on that, I was going to ask you, should what's your name?
Dina.
Should Dina be teaching her students how to be the best journalists they can be, and not teaching them how to read? I don't know what you teach specifically, but not teaching them how to read prompt or the tone in their voice or this or that. You know, because the core of it that you need and that teachers like you bring so much value to is teaching you how to be a journalist.
That answers the question. I mean, being the best prompter reader or using or going into the audio booth and tracking it correctly is not really as important as getting the story right and learning how to utilize sources and learning what it means to second source a story. Because ultimately, we're all responsible as journalists for the information that we put out. We have to go to bed at night and feel right and good that we did the right thing.
And, you know, you get one chance, right? I mean, if you have a student who doesn't know how to be a good journalist, whether they are the best looking or the best prompt reader, this or that, if they break it, they break it. And that, you know, so I think that's core. I mean, what should Dina be teaching her class in this new age?
Well, if you're teaching them in terms of being on camera or...
TV news production at San Francisco State.
Okay.
We've got the studios. and we do-
Yes, you do. I've
Yeah.
been to SFSU, yes. Well, and I agree with both Poppy and Scott, is that if they're really great journalists and they know how to tell a story, that's what we care about the most. But because we've had a change here, a sea change of who those people are on camera, let them have emotion, let them have feeling, let them be able to react. I mean, many times on our show with Paula, she sits there and talks to that prisoner who's incarcerated and is just in pain, and she gets close to tears too and becomes emotional about it. When you have, again, this is my opinion, if you have the anchors and they're just reading, there's never a chance for an action, a reaction, or emotion. And I think you should be involved in that story in a way that really hits you.
One of our executives at CNN told me something really interesting the other week. He said, our stars, and we all know who they are, our stars are excellent reporters. If you see Anderson in the field, he's there because he's an excellent reporter. He's
Yeah, that's
also
true.
a great anchor,
Yeah.
but he's an excellent journalist and an excellent reporter. And his questions aren't all written out in front of him. They're, well, tell me how this happened in the middle of this disaster in Haiti or after Fukushima. And it's that sort of engagement. And I think some of his best stuff is walking around the rubble and let me show you and take you into this story.
And that's an interesting point too, because one of the things we also want to touch on is fashion. What do you look like? You don't have to comb your hair that way. You don't have to tease it up and spray it.
You don't think
You can
so?
wear a t-shirt. You know, I mean, And Anderson is one of those
No,
where
you're
he's
right.
put his T-shirt on, he's taken his shirt off. I mean, you don't wear what you're comfortable in. If you're a cool guy or a great-looking or not so great-looking reporter, be who you are. Put on what you are, and that's what's going to translate in this particular idea.
That's
But
a
the
very
old
good
J
point.
School never did what you are doing now. They didn't have studios. They didn't do prompter reading. They didn't even work on how to properly prepare yourself to be on air. What they did was how to properly prepare yourself for an interview. Because that's what you do as reporters. You interview, you gather information, you gather facts. And what's most important in the old J schools still applies today. But this is a different digital age now. And more J schools are getting more and more involved with their students on how to step out. I mean, Poppy, one-man band in New York One, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Had
that's
to
how
carry
I-
the camera, interview, put the camera up on
Edit
tripod,
my own stuff, right.
walk back, try to frame
Well-
it up, do a stand-up,
And that's the
watch
model.
it again.
That's the model we work with now at CNN Money. I mean, I don't edit my own videos now at CNN Money, but all of our producers do. And if they made me, I could try. I pull my own sound bites still down, and I still go through the tape. And I used to edit on Avid. We're on Final Cut Pro now. But we have a different model, and people from CNN from the different units come in and say, "How did you guys do that?" I mean, we started business news video online on the cheap. We built a studio in the middle of the newsroom. All of our producers shoot their own video on EX1s or JVCs. They edit it all on Macs. And it doesn't just air online, by the way. It airs all over television, international, domestic. Our set, which was built for web hits, is now used daily for TV. So it doesn't have to be expensive, but people need to know how to do more than one thing. I've shot whole pieces that have aired in prime time on my flip camera.
Yeah, but
I don't
that-
do it all the time,
and-
but you can.
And what you're saying is absolutely right, because it's not about how it's shot and how it's edited. Get it shot. I mean,
Tell
there's
the
a story
story.
that was on this morning or yesterday, the seaplane that went down with the family, and they crashed, and this other guy, they jumped in the water, they happened to be close by, he got the whole thing on the phone. That was the leading video on everybody's service.
But I have to say one thing, and I want to make this point. We also need to acknowledge that production value, especially video production value, is important.
Matters.
Right. So, you know, with all the types of television sets out there, the HD, the 3D TVs, you really can't have crappy video in these stories. So while the flip cam is great for a breaking news story, you know, you're getting a person on a fire escape in the middle of a fire, you're capturing that, that's terrific. But viewers want to see quality too. So whether it's on the web or whether it's on television, there has to be a mix of also very good production value using high quality, you know, 3-chip cameras to make sure that that's part of it too. Because viewers don't want to see grainy Skype shots.
Luckily,
all the time.
technology makes us able to do that in a less expensive
Right.
fashion now. I think we had a question right back here. Yep.
Yeah, I'm also a professor of journalism. I'm wondering how you staff your show. It's not going to be a traditional half-hour show, so
Right, so are you going to tease in? Are you, right.
Well, the majority of the shows that we, obviously the online portion of it, is going to be based on the news of the day. So we're not going to do the average rundown where you're going to open with a cold open, the news of the day, and then go to each specific person in a pod. I think what we're going to do is we're going to gather all the information, decide what is relevant for the eyeballs that we're trying to get. And ultimately, how we tease that, I'm not really sure exactly right now and how we put that out, but I think it's not going to be a traditional rundown where you're just going to open with a cold open and go to, you know, toss to somebody at a desk and who's going to walk around in a pod.
To build on your question, do you have a follow-up?
yeah, and if you do have packages in the show, are they going to be the traditional minute 30, or is it just going to depend on the story?
Yeah, I think so. It probably depends on the story as well. I think we should be flexible on all the packages and also, you know, want to be open-minded to the graphics and the music that go with it.
I don't think it's going to be stand up, bite,
Right.
stand up, tag, out. I think it's going to be a little bit different than that.
To build on that, I'm interested in how much you think what's trending, whether it's on Twitter or on Facebook, how much that should play in to the programming at all. I mean, obviously, sometimes what's trending is going to be the top story of the day,
Right. Yeah.
but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's some sort of odd thing that people have a fascination with.
That's a really interesting question. I think the use of Twitter and Facebook and all these other social media is extremely relevant to local news and will be relevant to us as well. I think that comes back to the breaking news part. It used to be where news broke in the city, people would turn on local news to find out that people were talking about something. But now, instantly, they're getting notified via their PDAs about
Yeah.
breaking news. Going to local news or even going online to any of the local newspapers or the local sites is an afterthought, is a follow-up to that. So I think what people are talking about is important, but it really depends on what the issue and the topic is.
I mean, after we report what the news story is, then come back to us online and continue the discussion. Continue whatever, you know, blog situation might be with whoever the reporter is. Even on Real Time with Bill Maher, you know, they finish the show,
Yeah.
and then if you want to continue on, you can go online.
And I was saying earlier today, I think 60 Minutes Overtime does that very well.
Right.
Very well.
Right.
Time for one more question if we have. Anyone? Okay, I have one
There's
last.
somebody right there.
Is there? I'm sorry, sir.
Yes, in this new frontier, do you see any possibility of enhanced product integration in terms of, that's been
Advertising?
traditionally- Yeah, but no, product integration hasn't really gone into the news, you know, area. It stays in the
Yeah.
entertainment side. Is there any future there?
It's tough to be promoting a.
Yeah, you know what, I guess that's the Edward R. Murrow, where you draw the line.
Yeah. I could have a
think
Diet
I think
Coke on the
I
news.
think it affects it. I mean, my issue, and I have used his name a couple times, and not in vain, you know, is with how we report the news. And the fact is, you know, we go into these situations in news stories, and you don't want to affect the way people's impression of how you cover the news. So I don't see us going out and promoting a product while trying to deliver the information.
But I would say
So-
this, I would say never.
Right.
Because, you know, all of a sudden the Geek Squad is part of our program, and that happens to be sponsored by Best Buy, and they're all in their Geek Squad black shirts by, you know, Nike. I mean, who knows? Anything is
Depends what
possible.
the news.
The only reason I ask is because I see the local news, local weather, and local entertainment. I'm sorry, local sports.
Local
Yeah.
sports.
Weather and local entertainment. But, so I was just wondering if that's a trend that's going to continue.
But there's strict regulations and rules at stations on what can be promoted. I mean, obviously, sports is one thing, weather. There's no real content within those issues that really are, you know, where you're not.
They might not have to cover the company
Right,
as you would in I mean, business news specifically, right?
Right.
You never know. One last thing, we're running out of time, but we're totally out of time. Okay, I'm getting the note.
Are we totally out of time?
I think so.
We're totally out of time. By the way,
yeah,
Dina,
continuing
we
online.
would like you, Dina, to make sure you send us some of your students.
All right, guys, thanks so much for coming.